let me do a quick introduction of our panelists, and then I'll introduce our moderator. So starting there with Aunia Grogan. By the way, this is a fabulous international group here. We have a citizen of the United Kingdom, a Canadian, an Israeli, and a German here, and they are all going to speak without simultaneous translation. So first, Aunia Grogan, who studied modern European studies at Thames University, recently stepped down from her role as the global CEO at Atlantis HealthCare. She was a consultant at McKinsey with senior management roles in marketing and research. A colleague of hers said that she is what I would call a true expert in encyclopedic knowledge of brand management and insight development. Next is Michel Nadeau, who's the president, CEO, and founder of TACTIO Health Group, which uses smartphones especially to replace single-purpose devices. He's a celebrated engineer in Canada. His family is well known as philanthropists, as physicians. And when I looked at his CV, one of the things I noticed, and I love that this is included in his CV, was that he was for 4 months a janitor at the oldest hospital in Montreal in his early days. But I think his proudest accomplishment as having been awarded Parent of the Year at his kids' college, high school hockey team. Congratulations for that. So, Ido Hadari is Israeli. He is the CEO of Treato, a social health analytics company. He holds a magna cum laude BA from Business Administration and Economics at Hebrew University. And Treato scours the web for information, not only the kinds of things that we would want to get on the factual stuff in academics, but also what all of us as consumers and patients have said about things, about processes, about medications. And it was, from its beginning, a hit. And then finally, our moderator, who will take over from here, is Wolfgang Renz, who is president of the International Business Physicians Interactive, and he holds a medical degree and a PhD from Freiburg University and is board certified in Germany in emergency medicine. He's an academic, and when I looked on the web for things which maybe you're particularly proud of, a recent publication is entitled Bike Sharing System Reliability Problems, a Database Analysis and Simulation Architecture.
That's my twin in Hamburg.
Okay, here you go. Is that really not you?
That's not me.
Well, but we are asking you to speak about that this morning. No, just kidding.
Good morning, everybody. I'm a little bit jealous I'm on that, not on the dark side, because you can still relax. Our retinas have been glued by now by this light, but it's awakening. So quickly, a couple words about my career so far. I've spent about the last 20 years on the pharmaceutical side, trying to drive revenue, trying to do clinical development, and trying to be patient-centric. As you know, all the big pharma companies now have this big movement to be patient-centric, and automatically, if you come from the physicians or patient side, you have to ask, what have they done then the 30 years before? So everybody now has this mantra now being, patients are coming in the middle, but truly, if we're honest, the pharmaceutical companies have been in the past more prescriber-centric. And now we're coming to the conclusion that the patient, who is the consumer, becomes more and more important. But now the big question is, how can we engage and empower the patients? With the acceptance of the mobile technology, the internet, we have seen a paradigm shift in the last 5 years. However, and this is what we want to discuss today, is how can we come over the hurdle of compliance, regulatory, and the legal restrictions that all the pharmaceutical companies are facing when it comes to being exposed to patient data which is not presented to us in an aggregated form. So that means we can identify a patient. One of the solutions could be that we start legal entities outside of the core business of pharma, or we collaborate with companies where we have representatives around the table here. Everybody has been introduced, but I still would like to go through them step by step. Maybe they can make comments about what they have done in the past, what they're now planning to do. They have different backgrounds. Some are on the mobile devices, some are in the app technologies, and some do something completely different. And I would like to encourage you then to ask also very critical questions, that we come to an open discussion. where can we go with this patient engagement? Where are the limits? And is it maybe altruistic only? Is data a commodity? Or where's the line in between it? Because if we're honest, I think we all know we're sitting on a gold mine if we have access to that kind of a data. But we need to define it and package it the right way to avoid being very heavily criticized again. Aunia, maybe you want to start.
Thank you very much. I wanted to just add a couple of words about my background, just so you have an understanding of what's the context that's generated these comments. I spent the first 12 years of my career working in financial institutions, back in the days, which dates me slightly, when people still trusted banks. And I've spent the last 12 years working in pharma in one form or another, either as a consultant at McKinsey serving pharma organisations and a few payer providers. Also, most recently at Atlantis HealthCare, where I ran a company whose core business is serving pharma as an agency providing patient support programs. And in the middle, I had a period at global headquarters of Novartis, where I was global head of adherence, where I saw things from the pharma side about what they're trying to achieve and how tough that can currently be in the environment. So this is a personal view shaped by those experiences and those exposures. I think the reasons why pharma wants to engage with patients is incredibly well documented, and it's not a good use of my time or yours to run through those again. The one that I would keep coming back to is that patient behaviour, once they're on a therapy, if they're not behaving in the right way, your therapy just isn't going to work. Incredibly well documented. That's the point where engaging with patients by somebody, be it pharma or somebody else, is absolutely essential. And frankly, it isn't being done well enough at the moment. That has massive implications, potentially catastrophic for the patient, huge costs for the system. And it also, frankly, is something which is undermining business model of pharma itself. If they cannot consistently demonstrate the clinical impact of their outcomes, the clinical impact of their therapies, their value cases are compromised, and that pressure is going to become worse as time moves on. So regardless of that real need to do that and the stated intent of many in the industry to engage with patients and become more patient-focused, my view is they're falling very, very far short of that ambition for a variety of reasons. I think that the nature of the pharma business is one of the factors that gets in the way. Their context is obviously problematic, but I think it's unfair and also not a way forward to blame it all on pharma. I think everybody needs to look at why isn't this happening more than it should? Is there a role for pharma, and could they be doing better, and could they be allowed to do better, to your points about regulatory, etc. My experience is big pharma, both as a supplier, both as a consultant and as somebody working in pharma. Doesn't really get much bigger than Novartis. My experience in Novartis included things like the development of Proteus, the chip in the pill, died a bit of a death, but still out there as a very strong company, just not really working in the Novartis environment anymore. And the clue is in the name, big pharma. Generally speaking, the very large organisations, and many of you will know who work in the payer-provider side, the big organisations, not really good at change. It's just tough organisationally to swing the ship round and do things differently. And I think that if you want to go for radical change, you need to do that. And patient engagement, true patient engagement, really is quite a radical change from the way in which pharma is operated. Pharma is undergoing seismic change. Everybody knows about the patent cliff and all of that. What that actually means on the ground is similar to what's happening in a lot of healthcare in the States and elsewhere. Massive change going on in the UK, massive change going on in other regulatory environments outside of the US. Many organisations are in flux. The industry, pharma particularly, is downsizing. You're losing people, and that means that you're losing a lot of corporate heritage, a lot of corporate understanding, a lot of that implicit knowledge of what works, what doesn't, what's being tried. You're also, you've got a situation where, frankly, people are genuinely and legitimately worried about losing their jobs. And if they're worried about losing their jobs, that isn't a great environment for being risk takers. What happens? The risk takers, they leave. They go somewhere else, they get fed up, or they kind of decide, well, I can't take that risk, I need to go for something else that will suit better. You put all of that to one side, you could argue pretty clearly, to use McKinsey speak, a burning platform creates opportunities. And that impetus for change of what we're doing now isn't working, so let's try something different. But in that context, you just needs to be a realization that pharma understands 2 cycles really well, really, really well. And all of their organizational structure, career paths, personal and corporate interests are aligned around those 2 broad cycles. Drug development, 16 years, molecule to launch. Commercial innovation, 18 months, 2 years if you're really lucky. A lot of patient engagement, particularly where it involves any kind of technology, doesn't really fit into those cycles. It just doesn't work. And that means that really best case, you need kind of 4 years to make it work. That doesn't work in a commercial environment where most people, their tenure is 2 years. 2-3 years is pretty typical for somebody in a commercial role within pharma. So you need to think about how is what we're trying to do going to work in a pharma environment, and how can you help pharma to get it through all of their organizational internal hurdles, if you like. Beyond the nature of the business, and again, I say this as somebody who came from financial services, single biggest challenge is trust. I'm not going to argue the case here as to why trust in pharma is so poor. Whose fault is that? It's not what I'm here for. What I'm saying is now, today, there is very, very little trust. And you see that in conversations with physicians who kind of almost assume that you're asking them to do something unethical by having a conversation with pharma. You see it hardwired into the regulatory and the compliance arrangements. There is an assumption that pharma left to itself will do evil. Given that pharma has done a tremendous amount in the world, that's pretty harsh, and you can argue the merits of how on earth did they end up in that situation. There is an ingoing assumption, and I've seen this time and time again in meetings, both in pharma, where I was representing Novartis, where I was talking to Novartis, where I was talking in broad forums of pharma, where I had no connection with the pharma industry whatsoever. You will hear again and again and again, there is the assumption that pharma is only engaging in a way that will benefit pharma. Fair enough, it's a good assumption. It's the same that many people do. You will engage in something because, broadly speaking, there is a self-interest. What is different for pharma is the assumption that that self-interest is automatically to the detriment of somebody else. There is no notion of there being a genuine win-win. And that's a terrible situation for an industry to be in. And when you come to patient engagement, in my view, is absolutely at the heart of the matter.
So Aunia, maybe let's go over to Michel. He's one of the leading providers for medical apps in Canada. And from your perspective, Michel, what drives the different motivations of your clients who are paying, on how you get your patients actually engaged and avoid them dropping off after the 3 months, what we usually see? We see a lot of excitement usually, patients coming in, it's the same with the Fitbits, the Jawbones, that you can start collecting data, which is very valuable, but then all of a sudden 3 months later you see this dive. So one question is how you keep them engaged, really truly engaged, and what's the motivation for your clients to pay you money for your apps? Because the majority of the app providers are not making money. They have about 20,000 apps in the market. Not many companies are surviving.
Yes, well, at TACTIO, we, our mission, we bring applications and connected health devices for doing remote patient monitoring. Really for not the high-risk patients, but the rising risks, and using the benefit of telemedicine. That vision is actually well published and evangelized by Dr. Widener and Dr. Topol on Twitter that you can follow. And the way that we see that we have demand from the pharma industry, we had demand from pharma industry for quite a few years already, because we've been doing this since 2009, where there was no connected device to start with. And the pharma industry has asked really about four different things. One was the compliance with the treatment, which we haven't seen so much pharma engaging patients into that so far. The second area was research to collect data from anonymous basis, and that hasn't materialized too much as well. Third, the demand that we've seen from pharma is really more around the marketing of drugs. So the pharma wants to app-enable certain drugs to complement. For example, you have a drug to aid for sleep disorders, and they will want to complement with an experience that will bring out of the drug and bring some experience with the app and really get closer to the patient. And we have seen also demand from pharma, and it's probably the demand that we see the most, is to bring remote patient monitoring apps and all this for physicians and for pharmacists. And if you look at this, for them to remotely monitor patients, and for the pharma, it brings an application in the hands of people that are actually the bread and butter of the pharmas, which are the ones prescribing or changing the prescriptions. Now, as far as the user is concerned, the use of applications, we have active users who've been using the applications for several years now, and are not disengaging by the app. They see benefit in the engagement because of the quantity of things, the quantity of benefits, the personalization of the application, the personalization of the information. I think we have tried, for example, applications which brings information to the patient about health, and others who bring information about the health to the patient using their own information in the context of the scientific background that goes around it. Those apps actually have tracking, engagement, a link to a lot of connected devices that they can use in their own life, brings a lot more engagement. When the applications have, they bring you into the context of, it's personalized medicine. It brings you advice, scientific advice based on your own data, and you don't need to collect the information because the information flows in automatically, so you benefit from reports, engagement, advice, and coaching without having the burden to enter things. And I think if you remove this burden of data entry and you come with analytics and coaching, the engagement is much broader, and it actually stays very long.
Where I want to go to in the next round is what we're going to do with this outcomes data. Is this something that has been mandated by the payers, or is it only a tool for the pharmaceutical industry to drive their strategic marketing decisions? But first, I would like to go to you, Ido. Because when we spoke before, you said to me, on the one side, you're supporting patients by what you do, but on the other side, you have a very strong interest by Wall Street to get access to the data you're collecting. Can you tell us a little bit why this has such a broad stretch and what and how you do it?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. So I've been an observer and a participant in this digital health revolution, if I may call it that, for the past 3 years. And I have to say that the more conversations about this topic that I hear and I participate in, many of them talk about how this benefits pharma, and many of them talk about how this benefits the payers and the doctors, the providers, the caregivers, the ACO, everyone. For me, this whole thing is really about benefiting the patients. And that's what we're focused on. We're focused on the voice of the patient. And I think the good news, if I may start off with an optimistic perspective, is that I think that this conversation, this panel, 24 to 36 months down the road is going to look archaic. It's going to look completely irrelevant because that engagement cycle has already started. Now, you've mentioned the word earlier on in your opening comments about consumer, and I think that's the key term here. I think there's a new dawn for pharma. It used to be a B2 physician business, but it's no more. This is a consumer business. Pharma has become a consumer business. I think some pharma were very, very clever in getting this very quickly. And there are a few drivers, there are a few reasons why this has become a consumer business. The empowered patient is number one. Having access to information like never before. They walk into that physician's office. They know. They have access to information. They spoke to people. They know what their alternatives are. They understand what they're suffering from, and they have opinions. The empowered patient gets a lot of tailwind by the policy landscape, right? Obamacare, the ACA, high tech, a lot of acts designed to put results and put the patients in the center. It gets tailwind from cost pressures. Cost is becoming a big issue, and it's being rolled over again to the feet of the patient, now turned consumer. Diminished HCP access by many pharmas. They get less and less access to doctors. So it becomes more and more about the consumer. And a lot of tailwind from the FDA, and I'm sure many people are familiar with the FDA guidelines that started to come out in January this year and later on in June, etc. Basically acknowledging the importance of the patient as a partner in the treatment process and opening up the door for that collaboration. So I'll take it to the extreme a little bit to make it interesting and say that many pharma companies need to start thinking like Apple, like Amazon, like consumer companies, because these are health consumers. Now, having said that, just to give a little bit of context about what we do, and apropos your question, what Treato does is Treato has built the technology and infrastructure that enables it to understand the health of the internet, not the servers themselves, but the people on the internet. If there's one place where you can see all the patients taking all drugs, all conditions, all treatments in one place on a regular, rigorous daily basis, that's the internet. We've built the technology and the infrastructure that enables us to go out there and literally scoop in each and every health, well-being, medical-related conversation out there in the social sphere. And I say social sphere, for many people that's Facebook and Twitter, right? Well, yes, but it extends well beyond that. It's tens of thousands of forums and blogs and communities, all the way from the big Facebooks and Twitters and Reddits and Tumblrs down to that long tail of the internet, where people come in and generate millions of conversations each and every day about their own lives and their own personal experiences and their own personal treatment pathways. We bring all of those into a big data infrastructure and use a lot of technology, proprietary technology, in order to understand it still on a massive scale and still in real time, but very deep. Now, when I say very deep, it's amazing what technology can do for you these days. We can actually understand the patient journey. Think about 2 million diabetics. Think about, this is October, think about 1 million breast cancer patients. We can actually understand their patient journey from getting diagnosed, whether it's initially diagnosed or previously diagnosed, through getting treatment, getting better, getting worse, getting hospitalized, all the way to mortality or well-being. We can understand how they consume their drugs, the drug's efficacy, the drug's safety in the real world out there once it has left Walgreens or CVS. We can understand their switching behavior. Not only what therapies they're switching to or from, but why. What drives that behavior? We understand what drives adherence. We understand their financial considerations. All those 63-and-a-half-year-old patients with prostate cancer that are waiting to be 65 in order to qualify for getting their drugs, and until they're not doing anything. And pharma can help, had they known that. We can understand, and this is interesting, their interaction with their physicians, not based on what the physicians are saying.
So Ido, you made a very interesting statement. In the pharmaceutical industry, you hear more and more now the word not patient anymore. We're speaking about an educated consumer. And I maybe want to direct that question now to you, Aunia. When we're looking at the other discussion that's very hot right now, pill plus, beyond the pill models, go away from the blockbuster model towards personalized medicine, which is completely a paradigm shift from the blockbuster model anyways. How is this revolution almost to have those patients now that come to us as physicians, sometimes knowing more about the disease than we do without consulting our literature? How do we have to change the business model in total from a pharma perspective now to accommodate to this new ecosystem environment?
I think the honest answer is uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable in the way that many physicians find it uncomfortable because it's a shifting of power. And that makes people uncomfortable because there's a feeling of a loss of control. The people who are, I'd also say, I came from consumer marketing into pharma. If I used 10 years ago, if I used the word consumer, they pretty much dismissed me as a lightweight who didn't understand the realities of pharma. And that has changed. It is better. It's not there yet. You could argue that the massive change that the industry is going through, in the same way that we're getting new generation of consumers coming through, we're getting a new generation of people in pharma business. That's going to help. I agree completely. I don't think it's going to be as quick as you think it is, but I think once it happens, it will be an avalanche, and it will happen very, very quickly. So back to your original question, it's very uncomfortable, but people who kind of get what it is, they are excited by it. Again, I think the same as you see some physicians who are comfortable with that loss of control are excited by it because they see it as a way to have a bigger impact. And if you embrace that and see that as a way to have a better impact, you are going to try and push for it to happen. But the reality in my experience, and again, as I've very clearly stated, I haven't served everybody. It's a very precise group of people that I've worked with, of 5 of the top 10. It isn't really happening in a scalable way, because even where you're getting evangelists and believers internally, and you're changing minds internally, you're then starting to hit the regulatory. I've been coming to conferences in the States for probably about 6 years, nearly always payer provider and academics, and the people I almost never see are regulators. And partly it's because I'm not a regulatory expert, but at general forums with all comers, you don't really see the regulators. So in my view, until you've got the demand and the push for the regulators and the compliance, the people who are setting up the compliance regulations for things to change, you're not going to see that avalanche. It's definitely coming in the US, but there are still massive hurdles. It's in the UK, people kind of think, well, you've got a National Health Service, so surely everybody knows what's happening. No, that's a complete fallacy. I don't know anywhere, with the exception of some Scandinavian markets and New Zealand, where you have a unique personal identifier, which at the system level means that you can look at all of the data coming together. It doesn't exist anywhere else. And until you have that and the barriers go down around that happening, I think it's really going to be difficult to achieve the potential that's out there.
I want to take you in a little bit of a different direction now. When I worked in clinical development about 20 years ago, after we completed phase 3, that was pretty much the work done for us. Now we see, I want to go to Canada especially, and the Scandinavian markets, a completely new direction of the regulators and the payers, that they say, you provided me safety and efficacy data, great, you get your approval for the marketing. However, we give you only conditional reimbursement, and you have about 2 to 3 years' time to provide me enough sufficient outcome data to prove this drug is working well for my society and for my checkbook. Is this also something, Michel, that you think is driving the increase of your app business in the future as a source to collect that kind of outcome data?
I don't think so. Well, first let me just rectify a little something. We are based in Canada. We have much more. It is not easy to sell something in Canada because it's government owned, and it moves at the speed of the government, and that's unfortunate. But we have much more fun in activity working in the US and in Europe, actually, even in some countries where it's governmental as well. So where we see, I think it's really the drive for what we do is really all about owning the digital space of the patient. If you look at some revolution starting with the first book of Dr. Topol, The Creative Destruction of Medicine, a few years ago. I think the title of his new book in January says it all. It's The Patient Will See You Now. And reaching back to some of the earlier comments on this panel, doctors today spend maybe half their time explaining to patients what they don't have. Because patients, they go to see the doctor, they've read everything on the internet. They've read everything about all the disease and all the disastrous situation they could have. And doctors do spend a lot of time explaining what they don't have. And they do have to do this because patients come with all these printouts, records, and all this. doctors need to engage with patient, and right now we're seeing pharmacy chains in hospitals seeing the need to enter this personal digital space of the empowered patient, owning this space and being much closer to them to bring various treatments and various preventive telemedicine. And I think that's the biggest driver that we see today. Yeah.
Ido, maybe you could be answering this question since you also have an Israeli background. Israel has 2 huge databases where you can do retrospective analytics on millions of patients. Are you able already to combine your snapshot data and analytics with historical data to come up with predictive algorithms regarding outcome and also sales marketing decisions? Or have you not thought about this process yet?
So actually, yes, Israel is pretty advanced in that.
Yeah, sorry, a notable exception. I apologize.
I have nothing to do with that. But it's a slightly different market. It's a Kaiser Permanente model, and there are 4 big ones, and you have to be in one of those 4, and they all have EMRs, and they have access to all the information. We don't operate in that market. But I think it's a very interesting direction that you just took. I think that one of the big hurdles psychologically is that as an industry, as healthcare, is almost addicted to hard data. It knows how to digest and process numbers and percentages, and this is the unique identifier, and this is the changing percentages, and whether it's clinical or insurance or anything of the existing data streams. And I think the whole engagement piece is very soft. Okay, you know where you're going to start, you never know where you're going to finish. We are actually seeing a lot of pharma. So we're working with quite a few pharmas today, just to kind of give a sense of what kind of engagement we're seeing today. 2 years ago, roaming the corridors of pharma and talking about understanding the patients out there in engagement, they would drive you out with a stick, to your point. Or garlic cloves, or a silver cross, whatever works, just get out of here. Today we're working with 11 of the top 50 global pharmas, and it's getting much better. MLR is much less of a consideration. That fear of seeing adverse events has pretty much disappeared. So I think they are seeing the value and they are benefiting. The type of data, the soft data, the engagement-related data, the type of data that we have is great. The hard data, critical and great. I think that
The intersection.
I think that the combination is phenomenally beneficial. We're trying to figure it out. There is predictive value in that. As an example, you can see the cold numbers of switching. If you take the IMS, the script data, you can see the switching. But you could have seen these switching conversations 2-3 months ago and make a deduction about how the patient is going to behave. So I do think that that combination is extremely powerful, and that's definitely something we're exploring.
I mean, we have here people from 4 different national backgrounds, and when I look at engaging the patient, I'm also missing the word empowering the patient, but what comes always to my mind right now, especially with my German background, is privacy. Who owns this data? And I know we're in America here where there's a different approach to this. If we would have Scandinavians sitting here, they would probably completely not understand that issue because there it's almost a publicly owned data set. You as a patient, you're handing it over to the society. Canada is also slightly different. So how do we tackle this in the different legal environments? How you do it? I mean, you're in Israel, in the US now, trying to do business. Completely different environment. You have dealt with the NHS in the UK, where you do completely different data grab. And Canada, as a government-run, provincial-run system, is, again, on the other side of the moon. So who owns that data in the future? Who's commercializing it?
Huge, huge question. I mean, how you deal with it now, when I was at Atlantis, the reality is, and I'm sure you guys are the same, it is another language, in the same way that when I'm launching a program that has 15 languages and I need people who understand idiomatic language in each of those markets to translate my program, I need to know who understands the legal and regulatory environment in that market and go from there. So putting aside what it's like today, in the future, I genuinely don't know. And I think the examples that you cited are sort of give an insight as to the factors that are going to affect it. Some of them are to do with, what are the rights of the individual versus the rest. If you look, and I won't name names, but some of the work that I've done in some markets in the Middle East and in Asia, where it works best is where it's not a democracy.
I was just going to say the Middle East works best.
I hasten to add, I am a diehard Democrat with a small d. I am not advocating that in any way, shape or form, but the reality is that's where it works.
I was just going to say, I'm not proud of it myself, but we all are going right now to the Middle East because we love the access to the data there, because all the data is public except of the royal families in those countries. So, but is that the ethical right approach to do it because we can't do the same things here? I don't know.
It is also where it demonstrates the fact that where you have a full integrated data set, you have most impact. If you look at the steps that are being taken to combat diabetes in the Middle East, huge, massive, endemic societal problem. If you had that kind of problem in Europe, you just wouldn't be able to have the same impact, not in that same time frame.
That takes me to the next question,
very
Aunia.
tough.
When we're talking about engagement, empowerment, there's also another word coming with this, which is accountability.
Yeah.
Are we flipping that around in the future that we say you as a patient or consumer, you're actually responsible for your actions?
Yeah.
And we put a deduction on your health plan based on your behavior that we can measure.
I'd even go a little bit further than that, and I admire I'm very happy that you're not having people concerned about adverse events. I spend more of my life talking about adverse events and somebody's holiday entitlement than almost anything. Because while patients are becoming empowered, the reality is that the responsibility that comes with that empowerment is lagging. There is an assumption, rightly or wrongly, that that's what the legislative framework is there for, because the individuals can't be responsible. And until you square that a little bit, I don't think we as an industry, the healthcare industry, not pharma or anybody else, is capable of really doing absolutely the best thing for the patient, because people are too scared. The consequences could be catastrophic.
We got 10 minutes left. Michel, I would like you to answer, and then I would like to open it to the podium because I can see a couple of people itching now to ask questions. Michel, please go.
Yes, well, I just want to come back to the question of who owns the patient data. And I think this year, this question has been answered on a global scale. Who owns the patient data is the patient. And Apple has seeded this idea in the hands of probably 1 billion people owning Apple devices today. The Apple Health Kit, whether or not it is used today, is a very important news in the fact that Apple today, technically speaking, they prevent applications from using iCloud and Health Kit together to go on the App Store. And the reason is simple, is if you use the iCloud service, you may take information from HealthKit and put it in an Apple server that's on iCloud. And Apple does not want any piece of data on their servers. They don't want any responsibility with that. The data resides on the phones themselves and on the systems connecting to those phones, which are non-Apple. By doing this, they have put the patient with the power to select what information they want to share, how they want to share it, with who they want to share it. So they made the DMARC point the most personal device that the patient has, which is their phone actually, and it's actually only resides on the iPhone. And I think this is seeding globally the idea that the patient data belongs to the patient and they should have the power to do what they want with it.
But what you're saying right now is a very interesting summary of what pharma companies have to a large extent not fully understood, that what they initially tried to drive for their very purposes of creating profitability for their revenue targets and their compounds is moving out of their hand now over to companies like a Facebook, like an Apple, like an Intel. So we see complete industry paradigm shift. So now the pharma industry is not anymore proactive. They're continuously reacting to the new ecosystems.
Absolutely.
So I'd like to open it to you to come up with questions and drill them a little bit here since they're here. I see you are already itching. I think you should go there so everybody can hear it.
Hi, I'm Rick Lee. My question is about clinical trials and the privacy protections that have shrouded clinical trials, making them totally obsolete in the real world. What sort of breakthroughs are you seeing in applying consumer-centric solutions to clinical trials?
Ido, you want to take that?
Yeah, sure. So one comment about privacy, I think both apropos this question and the previous discussion. And again, maybe I'm fast forwarding into the future a little bit.
I'm not disputing it, I'm jealous.
I think we have to. I genuinely think we have to. I think that the concepts of privacy are changing, and have changed and are changing. And things that were considered private not that long time ago are now no longer considered private. And I think that people are much more open as humans, as a culture. The Facebooks of the world have changed what we consider to be private and what we consider to be intimate details. And I also think that people are willing to release some of that privacy in order to help themselves and help others. To this gentleman's question, so clinical trials is interesting. People sign up to clinical trials. They sign those confidentiality agreements where they're not supposed to talk to anyone about anything, and they go home and they open their computer or iPad and they start talking. We're seeing a significant amount of conversations about clinical trials. People are talking about their experience throughout the clinical trials to a degree that is, I think, almost dangerous, to be honest. So I also have my borders, okay? When someone writes online that if you go to doctor this and this, on street that and that, and you pay him such and such, you will get the drug and not the placebo. Okay, so I think it does go and extend. But again, I think it all goes back to that change that pharma needs to go through. I think it will also go through a safety. I think that safety, the way pharmacovigilance is being done today, and the way that clinical trial innovation is being run today, is not going to look the same 3 to 5 years down the road. Okay?
We'll compromise.
Not 2 months, 3 to 5 years down, because the internet knows everything, and the internet knows about it first. We saw Ebola coming up before Ebola came up. Okay? So the same goes for clinical trial, the same goes for safety. It's big words for an industry that the old tanker that takes time to change course. But the amount of reports of side effects and issues that we're getting on our consumer side today, per day, is larger than what the FDA sees in almost a year. So I think that change is driving clinical trials as well.
Thank you. More questions? It's hard for me to see you if there's any.
I have a question here. Martina Voitis, I'm from with HealthJump. I think the issue, now speaking as a patient, I think the issue that concerns me as a patient is not so much confidentiality as anonymity. I think we should separate those two. That I think most patients will accept the data to be used as research as long as that they see that data as being, they truly believe that the data is anonymous, that it won't be tracked to them. But in any case, it's a patient decision. I agree with you. It should be a patient decision to accept the anonymous use of my data. But I think most patients would accept that. Would you agree with that?
The number, according to statistics, is 70% of the patients are consenting, especially if they have chronic disease, if their data is used for research purposes. So you're correct. You're spot on.
Hello. Hi. Robert Sheasley. I lead enterprise architecture for Mylan Pharmaceuticals, and I spent the majority of my career consulting in both the payer and provider industry, so I've seen a lot of different aspects of healthcare, both as a consultant and currently now as the enterprise architecture lead for Mylan, which also includes business architecture. Wolfgang, you mentioned that for pharma to get engaged with the patient community, there are two paths. One is spin-offs, separate entities, and the other is partnerships. And I'm curious if the panel has seen any partnerships in other entities of the value chain from a pharma perspective, and if those partnerships have any horizon of success, because I think that combining a regulated industry as a pharma legal entity, there's a lot of hurdles and hoops to jump through with that.
Well, maybe I'm the best example for that. Having worked for 20 years for blue chip companies, I indirectly work for a blue chip company again because Physicians Interactive is a 100% owned asset by Merck, Sharp, and Dohme. Why has it been set up this way? Because Merck, like other companies, came to the conclusion that they wanted to have those kind of activities, engagement, empowerment of patients at arm's length in a different legal entity without their own staff in clinical development or marketing having access to that data. So you need to have that fence in between. When you're talking about partnerships, there's more and more now charities like the J. Fox Foundation, Michael J. Fox Foundation, and others who have an interest to collaborate with pharma, but not directly, more through vehicles like this to develop those new engagement empowerment of vehicles to go forward. One big issue was mentioned by Aunia is adverse events. If you're creating those kind of activities outside and you have a clinical compound in development, especially in the very sensitive phase 3, and those patients/educated consumers start blogging about clinical trials they're participating in, and they may be mentioning that they have diarrhea or vomiting for 3 days, while they know maybe they're on a placebo or not, but they're just making the statement that they're in a clinical trial of whatever compound with whatever company. The folks in that company that sponsor, they go nuts. Because all of a sudden now they have to merge clean data from research with so-called dirty data from the blogs outside. And that is a huge challenge right now. So this is a very big process in motion right now to create new vehicles. A lot of the big companies went very far ahead, all of a sudden stopped, went back because they got scared of their own shadows, but now it's starting to get into motion again. Adverse events is one. Fear of litigation is another one. If you get too much people together in blocks that are building a momentum to go against a compound, you know in the US 1-800-BAD-DRUG is one of those. As a European, we're always very stunned about what's going on in the States in that space. But there's a lot of different variables moving right now where we don't know where they're going. But I think the majority of the big pharma companies, and especially the smaller ones who are more flexible, not as slow in making that adaptation, are merging slowly towards not only engaging the patients, but also empowering them because they have understood that their current business model is about to expire, and faster than we anticipated. I hope that answers your question.
I do have a comment to make on that based on a couple of things I've observed both at Atlantis and Novartis. I'm conscious that I've sounded like a bit of a doom and gloom merchant, but I have seen successful partnerships in that good work is being done that has a positive impact on patients. In the public domain, AstraZeneca have done some great work with Atlantis in the UK around recruiting patients at point of care in cardiac units in the UK and putting them on patient support to help them to deal with the complexity of what's going on. And that program is now, it's growing out of all expectations because other people in pharma through other people in the healthcare system through word of mouth are ringing Atlantis and saying, we want to be on the program, who do we talk to? Novartis has done some great work that was published at the Canadian Cardiac Conference, where they've worked with regions in Russia to actually significantly bring down life expectancy, improve life expectancy through control of blood pressure. That's great work, and there are other examples out there, but the trick, well, maybe not the trick, but the thing I'd observe about them is in neither of those cases or the other ones that have I seen is impact quantified on the basis of the number of pills that you have sold.
Well, and that is maybe the challenge as a closing comment here. Companies like Boehringer Ingelheim and others, Novo Nordisk, Novartis, and you mentioned diabetes. They have done great work in that space, showing that you can change the outcome for type 2 diabetics if you do lifestyle modification. And the results were so good that a majority of those patients had a very significant weight loss, and they moved backwards to being pre-diabetic. So now, obviously, a marketing product manager gets scared because his revenues are sliding away. So now you need to discuss internally in the pharmaceutical company, what are we offering those patients in a pill plus beyond the pill concept to compensate for going revenues down because they don't need the compounds anymore, but maybe those pharma companies become also more a lifestyle provider support group. So there might be completely new business models emerging very soon because the work has been done, the results are stunning in the chronic disease, and maybe this is a new business area. It's under discussion right now, but we haven't figured out yet how to make the money with it. And that is the challenge. And money drives the show, and I think it's okay, but we need to figure out how to model it. Thank you very much for your attention. We know it was very early, but it was pretty busy already, so thanks for coming.